The Tau have seen huge improvements in Chapter Approved 2018, and I think these are going to change the Tau meta a great deal. Today on Tabletop Titans, I'm going to be going over all the points changes for the Tau army in Chapter Approved, as well as ranking what I think are the best units from the army, as well as showing you my new army list. Stick around. Before we get into the Tau specific changes, I want to talk about a change in Chapter Approved that's going to impact all the Tau players, and that's mission changes. One of the biggest changes is the fact that tabling your opponent no longer leads to a win. Now, if you've already been playing in competitive events like the ITC, you've seen this rule for a long time. But in most other missions coming from Games Workshop, I would expect to see this as a rule going forward. This means that the Tau always have to play the mission, control the board in order to win the game. And this is actually a tricky thing for the Tau to do. They dominate as a backfield army that can shoot everything, but they're not so great being up the board holding the objectives. An additional change is a small shift towards troops being more meaningful for scoring. Now, I don't know if this change will find its way into competitive events, but if this is a signal from Games Workshop, this could be a big difference in the game. The Tau do not really have great troop choices for getting onto objectives. Yes, we have the Fire Warriors and the Kroot, but they die just too easily, and they're a liability for the Tau army. So if we see this change go forward into competitive events, I think this could be a big shift for how effective Tau are at grabbing objectives. One of the biggest changes for the Tau is how you determine who goes first. Now you roll for who goes first before deployment. The winner gets to deploy their entire army first, and then the second player deploys their entire army, and then the one who deployed first goes first. Now there's still an opportunity to seize, but that won't be all that common. Now this is a big shift because the Tau in either of these positions can suffer a little bit. Your opponents used to have to be very careful when deploying against Tau. The risk of you going first meant that they had to be conservative, and then you could end up giving them first turn where they could end up not being too effective. In this case now, they know whether they need to be very defensive or whether they can be a little more safe to be offensive against you. This change will impact several armies, but I think it has a keen impact on the Tau who really want to hit you from range on that first turn. Another subtle change is the points decreases we've seen to multi-wound models. An example of this is the intercessors, which have gone down across the board. Now this is generally an advantage for Tau. If more armies start bringing elite style units with multiple wounds, then the Tau are going to be in a good position because the Tau specialize in killing elite models. So when you think about something like the Riptide, its gun has 2 damage. If you're killing a 1 wound model, you're wasting that damage. If more and more people are moving up to those 2 wound models, you could get a great deal more efficiency out of your weapons, many of which are either D3 damage or 2 damage. Next, I'm going to go over the point decreases. Now some of these haven't made a very big impact, but others have transformed the Tau meta and will likely change most people's army lists. The first thing here is the broadside, which went down 25 points to be only 35 points base. This is probably the most meaningful points decrease in the entire codex. This is a huge change for the broadsides, and I think it's going to mean you see a lot more broadsides in games going forward. Next up is the crisis suits, which went down 15 points to now be only 27 points. Now, crisis suits can have amazing weapons and hit really hard. I think this means you're going to see a lot more crisis suits, and I'm very excited about that, as they're of course the iconic unit for the entire army. It's not just standard crisis suits that saw a reduction. The hazard suits from the Forge World book also saw a drop, along with the crisis bodyguards. These are impactful because the hazard suit is very interesting, and the bodyguards can also serve a very interesting role. One of my favorite reductions is Shadow Sun, which is down 57 points to be only 110 points. If you were playing a Tau Empire army, I think she is an auto-include. And because of how good she is now, I think she's going to encourage more Tau players to consider gunline armies. The gun drone also dropped 2 points to be back in line at 10 points with all other drones. This might seem like a subtle change, but it's a big percentage drop for gun drones. Now you got to remember, gun drones put out a staggering number of shots, and when you take them in a large group with a drone controller, they can clear any screen in the game. I think you're going to see a lot more gun drones coming up, especially dropping down with crisis suits. Another big drop is the Skyray. Now, you didn't see this tank very often, but it already was very good. Now with its points drop, if you kit it out with smart missile systems and all the seeker missiles and the marker lights, it's only 146 points. It can do a lot of damage at that point cost, and I think this is a really exciting tank you're going to want to see on the board a lot more often. The last exciting unit that I think got a points drop is the Piranha, which went down 8 points. Now, I almost never see anyone playing Piranhas, but I'm going to show you a little later how I think they could be a very tricky unit. Okay, so there are actually a lot more points decreases, and I'm going to quickly go over a few that I don't think make a very big difference at all. Now, of course, the Hammerhead with the railgun went down 8 points, but the railgun is still just one shot, and compared to the Ion, it's almost never worth taking. Pathfinders with rail rifles also went down 5 points, but the rail rifle is just still too expensive, and on a Pathfinder who can die so easily, I don't think I'll be taking these units ever. The Razor Shark also went down a few points with the reduction in its gun, but the Razor Shark and all the Tau Flyers are still not very viable. The Riptide's Ion gun went down, but compared to the Burst Cannon, it's not a very interesting weapon. And lastly, the Storm Surge saw a pretty big drop, 53 points. And although the Storm Surge is an awesome model, really exciting to play, I really still don't think it's very viable. The last points decreases I want to go over are units that I think could be good, but until I've playtested them a little more, I'm not really sure where they land. The first among these is the Ghost Keel. Ghost Keel saw a pretty sizable decrease, and it's an interesting battlesuit. But for me, the Ghost Keel is actually a liability. It gives away kill points in the form of its small drone squad, and I tend to find it just doesn't output enough damage. Your opponent can often just ignore it, and I'm not sure if this points decrease is enough to change the fundamental problem with that unit. The Taunar went down 750 points, which is probably one of the largest, if not the largest, points drops in Chapter Approved, and this takes it back to its points that it was before Chapter Approved of last year. Now, the Taunar is a pretty scary model, but in a 2,000 point game, it's actually not really a threat. I think that you'll see some people trying to bring it just for fun, but it's not seriously very interesting at 2,000 points. It just actually doesn't have enough output, and it can't really do enough target priority as it has to shoot everything all at once. The Devilfish also went down, and while I wish infantry with Devilfish was a very viable strategy, I don't think it's too interesting, so I don't expect to see too many of those on the board. And lastly, the Remora Stealth Drone went down. I think this could be a very good unit, but until I've play tested it a little more, I'm not too sure. The 3 wounds on these guys usually get cleared out really fast, but they could be one of the best units for scoring objectives. So I'm going to try them out and see if they're worth it. With all the changes to the Tau points now, let's go over what are the best units in the Codex. Now, a good way that I use to evaluate this is I pick a points limit, in this case 300 points, and I try to put 300 point units together from multiple entries, and I compare the base statistics of each of these. So I did that for all of the units that the Tau have, and I'm going to show you just the best units, the ones that really stand out, and I've ranked them from tier 1 to tier 5. So let's jump in and take a look at these various 300-ish points units and see which one came out on top. In tier 1, we have only 2 units. Now, these still 2 remain the best Tau units for both damage, durability, versatility, etc. The first one here is the Broadside, and I'm really excited to see this unit come back up on top. 3 broadsides are approximately 300 points, or with an advanced targeting system, they'd be about 316. And this is just the highest volume of quality shots you could get for these points that also have a strong defense. Now, there's 24 high-yield missile pod shots, and you got to keep in mind those are strength 7, minus 2 AP, D3 damage, and they have a really sizable range. That's an amazing number of shots. There's also 24 smart missile shots, and the smart missile is critical. I think you're going to see a lot more terrain on the board coming up, and so having those smart missiles is just absolutely crucial. They also have 18 wounds between them, and these are pretty tough wounds to take away. They're T5, 2-up save, but of course, they're battle suits, which means when you have those big drone blobs near them, you're not going to be taking these suits out very often at all. Now, if you take them in a big unit of 3 with command and control node, you can reroll all the wounds for that entire unit. That is unbelievably good. And if you pair it with Shadow Sun, who's giving you reroll hits, for 2 turns you could have this unit reroll all hits and all wounds, and be almost impervious to damage with a couple drones behind it. This is unbelievable. Another big strength is, unlike the Riptide, you could split fire with these. The Riptide's big 18 shots have to go into one target, but these guys have 2 high-yield missile pods each, and then 2 smart missile systems each. This means it's very easy for you to spread these shots out across enemy units, maximizing their potential. This is not to be overrated. This is a very powerful ability. There are some downsides to the broadside over other units. The thing I dislike the most is the fact that they don't have fly. They're very susceptible to someone tagging them in combat, and then you lose all that firepower in the subsequent turn. This means you have to screen them very, very aggressively. And of course, if you're Tau Empire, it's already very punishing to charge you. But if that one model survives and gets through, it can shut down a lot of your shooting. So be very careful with this unit when you're screening it. They also have a very limited move, and because they don't have fly, it really limits where they could go. They're not infantry models, so they're not going to get up high into ruins, and they're not going to be able to go through buildings, and they can't fly over the buildings, so they have very limited mobility for the Tau. This can be pretty tricky to get them into the right position. The last thing about them, which I don't think most people ever talk about, is the fact that they're much shorter than a Riptide. Having that tall Riptide means that he almost always gets line of sight on whatever he's targeting. In fact, in the ITC, where ground floor ruins block line of sight, my Riptide is often able to see through the second floor and still target units hiding on the ground floor. And because it has fly, it can go high up in a building and even get better line of sight through sometimes the top of buildings right down inside. This is an incredibly valuable ability, and it means that the Riptide has a lot more choice at what it targets. Speaking of the Riptide, it is still the other unit up here in Tier 1. The Riptide is still an amazing unit, and I think it is neck and neck with the broadsides. Despite the fact that it has fewer shots with only 18 heavy burst cannon shots and 8 smart missile systems, it does have a lot of the things I just talked about. It has the height, it has the move, but it also has a 5-up invulnerable save base, which can be boosted to a 3-up. That is a crucial difference. And it also has 2 support systems instead of 1, which means it not only gets the advanced targeting system, but it can get a target lock or velocity tracker. That velocity tracker can win you a lot of your toughest games, especially against Eldar. It's also worth noting that the Riptide at T7 is even a little harder to wound. And so when someone finally gets through your drones, the Riptide is a lot more durable with that T7 and also with that invulnerable save. It's a big change. So for me, I don't see the Riptide going away at all. I just see it being supplemented with broadsides where perhaps it wouldn't have been before. Okay, at Tier 2, I have a surprising unit, which is one of my favorites, the Hazard suit, particularly with the double burst cannons. Now, if you'd have 5 XV9 Hazard suits, they're about 315 points. Now, this is a massive 80 shots at Strength 5, AP 1. This is the highest volume of AP-based shots you can get for this points in the entire Tau army. This can clear entire Horde armies in single turns if you have Marker Light support. Now, if you take a big unit of these as a Farsight Enclave, drop them down, get the +1 to hit with Marker Lights, you'll be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. Now, of course, that applies to all Crisis suits that use that tactic, but you could see with 80 shots what kind of difference that's going to make. Additionally, again, you could go for the command and control node on a big squad here. That's going to be a common theme you see here, and you can clear entire armies. They're very devastating. On top of that, there are also 25 wounds at T5 with a 3-up save, right? So this is more wounds than you got with the broadsides and more wounds than you got with the Riptide. So not only is it a huge number of shots, it's also very, very durable. And each suit is durable. It's not just 3 wounds, it's 5. And that's that magic number that really is inefficient for your opponent. If they have 2 damage guns or 3 damage guns, they really have to waste some of that damage to take these guys out. Now, of course, because they're battle suits, you bring them down with drones or you keep them near drones. And again, they're very, very tough to remove. Of course, unlike the previous units, they have Manta Strike, like all Crisis suits. That's really important because this 18-inch gun is really one of the weaknesses of this unit. And of course it is only 1 damage, but that's what they're here for. They're here to come and clear those screens that are 1 damage models. They're also really good if you're going up against things like intercessors that are just 2 wounds. Because of the strength 5 and the -1 AP, they're really efficient at doing that. Despite all the points decreases in crisis suit weaponry, the next unit in Tier 2 is crisis suits with ion. Now the ion gun is one of the only Tau crisis weapons that didn't see a points decrease, and that's because it was clearly the best one, and it really still is. At 306 points, you get 4 crisis with ion. Now this is 33 ion shots, and you have to remember that can be strength 8, -1 AP, D3 damage. So 33 strength 8 shots a turn from this unit, that is unbelievable damage output. And because it's spread out against so many shots, you can take down things like big knights with 3-up invulnerable saves because you're not wasting that AP. It's a lot of shots rather than very few shots. Now the downside to this unit is it's only 12 wounds. And so it's the fewest number of wounds that we've seen so far for 300 points. And they are only toughness 5, only a 3-up save. And so this unit can be cleared pretty easily. So to get the most out of this unit, you really are going to have to spend a lot of extra points to bring a decent number of drones down with them. And one thing I always advocate with this unit is keep them as far out of range as you can. When you drop them down, keep them within 6 inches of other Tau units so that you could benefit from the overwatch. But that's if you're playing Tau Sept. Of course, these work very, very well as Farsight enclaves because that turn you come down, the +1 to hit means you can't suffer from your overcharge ability. And that's really crucial with these guys. Additionally, they could be interesting with Vior La. You could start them on the board, advance and shoot with them. That can work too. Okay, now we're into Tier 3, and I think there are 3 units that fall into this category. The first one, and perhaps the one I'm most excited about in Tier 3, is the Piranha. Now for 290 points, they get 40 wounds. Now this is because you don't only get the wounds from the Piranha itself, you get the 2 gun drones each, which when you kill the Piranhas, they pop off, they disembark. Yes, you could end up rolling a 1 when they disembark and die, but you're not going to do that too often. And those additional wounds are what makes this so crucial. Of course, they still get 60 strength 5 shots, which is a huge number of strength 5 shots. The other standout about these guys is the 16-inch move. Now these fill a huge gap for the Tau, which is board control. If you've got a big gun line at the back, you need to get to the objectives, you need to harass your opponent, you need to charge their hiding shooting units, you need to get behind enemy lines or get line breaker. This is perhaps the best unit in the Tau Codex to do all of those things. And because they're fairly tough, they have to waste high quality shots at them, which they're not taking at your gun line. My ideal way to take these isn't in a big unit of 5, it's in units of 2. A unit of 2 Piranhas is surprisingly hard to kill. If you move them out and sit them on an objective, an opponent has to kill not only 2 separate Piranhas, but then 2 separate units of 2 gun drones each to take you off that objective. That's really, really challenging, and it's probably most of their army just because they have to do it in sequence. So I think this could be a really, really tricky unit, and I'm really excited to bring maybe 2 units of 2 of these and see how they perform. The next unit in Tier 3 is the gun drone. At 300 points, you get 120 strength 5 shots. This is the most shots you can get for 300 points. This is the most shot point for point you could get in the Tau army. Now, it's only 30 wounds, but they are at toughness 4. They do have fly, they do move 8, and they double as protection for your other suits. They do have savior protocols. Of course, they can also deep strike. So, big blobs of these drones are very, very powerful. Of course, they do have drawbacks. Only ballistic skill 5 means you have to get that drone controller. A tricky one is the fact that they need to shoot the nearest target, so you have to be very careful where you place them and don't let your opponent game you. The one way that I prevent that is if they move a target closer I don't want to shoot at, of course you can always shoot with the rest of your army, clear that target, and then free up the proper target for your gun drones. The other thing they suffer from is leadership. They have only a very low leadership of 6. In my opinion, you have to have an ethereal near them to give that leadership 9, and you have to be careful with the unit size you take. Usually 8 to 10 is about the largest I'll take, or they could start suffering from morale issues. The last unit in Tier 3 are the strike teams. Now, for 297 points, you get 108 shots. Now, that's pretty close to what you got with the gun drones, but they also have the added benefit of giving you battalions or brigades for command points. So that's not to be underrated. They put out a lot of shots, but they can also give you command points. The Fire Warriors are a bit of a liability. They don't have fly, so they can't fall back and shoot, unless you maybe have Darkstrider nearby. And they are susceptible to being trapped in combat, and this could be devastating for the Tau army. Because they don't have fly, someone could wrap them up with a crucial squad, and now you can't shoot at it next turn. For me, that makes the Fire Warriors almost more of a liability. They're also the easiest kill points in your entire army. At only toughness 3 with a 4-up save, the rest of your army is very hard to clear, but those are the easiest kill points for your opponent. The first unit in Tier 4 I want to go over is the Crisis Suits with the Plasma. Now, Plasma Rifles saw a big points decrease in Chapter Approved, along with the big points decrease to Crisis Suits. That has this unit coming in a lot cheaper than it used to. For 306 points, you get 6 Crisis Suits with 3 plasma each. And at rapid fire range, this is 36 plasma shots, which is an unbelievable amount of damage. The real problem with plasma rifles is they require the perfect target to be effective. You need to be hitting a model with under toughness of 6, with only 1 wound that doesn't have an invulnerable save to really get the most out of them. And it's just not that often that you're seeing generic Marines to make this worth their while. So for me, this unit is very, very devastating when taken against the right kind of unit, but really against most other things, you'll find their shots are kind of wasted. The second unit in Tier 4 is the Ghost Keel with Ion and Fusion. Now, Fusion saw a points decrease as well as the Ion weapons, so combine that with the Ghost Keel's already points decrease, and this unit's quite a bit cheaper. You get 2 of them for 316 points. Now, this is 12 Ion shots, it's 4 Fusion shots, and it's 24 wounds. And these are actually pretty hard wounds to take away because these suits could be -1 or -2 to hit. And of course, in these points costs, I've taken the shield generator, so it has a 4-up invulnerable save, and that makes it pretty tricky. It also has the infiltrate rule, which could be used to great effect for grabbing points or harassing an enemy early on, but I think these two are 4 kill points together. That's a pretty big risk in most tournament-style games, and it's kind of the lowest number of shots you're going to get for around 300 points. So you can see this unit's not really about damage. If you want damage units, this isn't the best 300 points you could spend. If you really need to harass an opponent, this might be interesting, but I don't really know what kind of harassing you're trying to do with them. So I'm going to need to playtest this unit more to figure out how it works, but it's seen such a dramatic points decrease. It can be a very durable unit, and if you trick your opponent into putting most of their guns into it, that could be pretty good for you. Okay, now let's look at Tier 5. This is the last tier, and it has 2 units in it that I still think are viable, but they're not really as good as the ones above. The first one I want to go over is Crisis Suits with Missile Pods. The Missile Pods saw a huge points reduction, which makes them attractive to take, especially on Crisis Suits, who also had a points decrease. But they really just don't work that well when you compare them to broadsides. For 288 points, you get 4 Crisis with Missile Pods, and this is 24 missile shots. Now keep in mind, that's the same number of shots you're getting from the broadsides, except the broadsides also get 24 smart missile shots, and they get the additional -1 AP. And the broadsides have more wounds. The only advantage these have is that they have the fly keyword and that they can Manta Strike. And really, that's not much of an advantage. You would hopefully be able to screen your broadsides, and they have enough range that you really don't need them Manta Striking on the board. So for me, if you want missile pods, you should be taking the broadsides and not going for the Crisis Suits. The last unit in Tier 5 we're going to go over are the Hammerheads. Now, at 330 points, you're going to get 2 Hammerheads with Ion and Smart Missile Systems. Now, this is 2d6 Ion shots and 16 Smart Missile weapon shots. It's also 26 wounds, so these are pretty good 26 wounds, and normally at T7 you would think they're pretty valuable, but because it's only on 2 big targets that are not battle suits, those wounds disappear very quickly. Most armies have 2, 3, or d6 damage weapons, and they're going to clear out these Hammerheads faster than almost any units in the entire Tau army. A big advantage to them, though, is they do have a ballistic skill of 3 that, of course, could be boosted with Long Strike to a ballistic skill of 2. So if you have them in a clump together with Long Strike, they're some of the most reliable shooting in the Tau army from a ballistic skill perspective, but because they're D6 shots guns, you can end up rolling very poorly with them. So for me, they just have 2 random of output, they don't have the durability, and they really don't fit the Tau theme of that high durability, high damage output that you're looking for across the army. Now, any unit that I didn't list in these 5 tiers, I think isn't even worth considering. Notable exclusions like the Storm Surge and the Yavara and all of the Flyers, I just don't think they can compete with these units that I've shown above. For me, if you're trying to build the strongest Tau army you can, you're going to want to pick the units in tiers 1 to 4, and that's where the vast majority of your points need to go. The last unit I didn't show are the Commanders. For example, at 300 points, you could get 2 Commanders with Ion Blasters, and this is going to be a really unbelievable amount of damage for its points. And the real reason for that is, of course, the reliability of their ballistic skill. But because of the points decreases you have to other units, they're no longer so far better than other Tau units. So if I had to put the Commanders, of course, I'd still put them into tier 1. I left them out because I think we all know Commanders are great. But yes, of course, Commanders are still tier 1 units. Let's go over how my army list has changed with these new chapter-approved point changes. Previously, I was running triple Riptides with a minimum battalion, a good number of drones, around 30, some of them marker drones, and I had some stealth suits for board control and 3 commanders. So the backbone of my army was 3 Riptides and 3 commanders for damage output. I had some marker lights, and I had some stealth suits to go and hold objectives. This has been an extremely effective army, and really it can take on almost anything in the meta. The gunline style army, in my opinion, has only gotten stronger for Tau, particularly with the addition of Shadow Sun. So that's the first change in my army. I'm going to drop a Cold Star commander in favor of Shadow Sun. Not only is she cheaper, but she's really going to level up my entire gunline by allowing them to reroll all shots twice, or in the games I need to, I can advance up into the center of the board on first turn and then reroll shots in the second turn. So Shadow Sun for me gives me so much tactical flexibility with that Master of War, and the fact that she only has 2 guns isn't a downside for me, because instead of shooting with her every turn, I'm going to use Command and Control node to give rerolls to one of my battlesuit units. That takes me into my second big change. I put a unit of 3 broadsides in, which are going to be the target of that Command and Control node. Now, as I made it clear, the broadsides can output the most number of high-quality shots for their points, and so I had to fit them in. I didn't want to lose any of my Riptides, so I was able to actually keep all 3 Riptides, but get a unit of 3 broadsides in addition by reducing some of my support units. I removed most of my Fire Warriors. I used to have about 30 or 36. Now they're down to the minimum of 15. And I also removed the stealth suits. Now this was a painful thing to take out. I love the stealth suits, but when it's either them or this unit of 3 broadsides, the broadsides went out for me. So the backbone of my army now is 2 commanders with Shadow Sun, 3 Riptides, 3 broadsides as a single unit, and then of course some Fire Warriors, still 29 drones, and an Ethereal to keep those drones around, and that's it. Against most opponents, this army is going to hit incredibly hard for those first 2 turns. I might be able to take almost all of my opponent's effectiveness out even in my first turn, and slightly tougher armies will almost always crumble in my second turn. The thing I have to watch out for with this army are opponents who can manage to stay far enough away from me, or boards that completely block my line of sight and don't let me get into position. The solution to both of those kinds of opponents is Shadow Sun. My ability to both advance and shoot in the first turn and then reroll shots in the second turn mean that they just delay their doom 1 turn. If you get an entire Tau gunline in the middle of the board that has largely 30 and 36-inch shots, there's nowhere to hide in the entire table. And in that next turn, where I get full target priority and I reroll all hits, it's very devastating. Additionally, because I have 29 drones, and in most deployments I'm going to be able to get a lot of them out of line of sight, it can take many turns for them to even harm a single battlesuit. And combat armies charging into this gun line are just going to suffer from such vicious overwatch that I don't think they're even going to want to charge. So this army can't really be charged, you can't hide from it, and if you're a typical mid-range board army that wants to try to outshoot me in the mid-board, you're just going to get my reroll shots twice in a row, and I'm going to clear you out. I think this is an extremely dangerous army list, and I'm excited to show you some battle reports with it in the next couple weeks. While I'm very confident in this army list, I'm really excited to try out some of the other units I've discussed today, most notably the Piranhas. I think they could be my solution to getting a lot more board control, and I'm going to see what I could take out to maybe get 4 or even 6 Piranhas into the army. This is going to allow me to get more reliable objectives like behind enemy lines or recon or other such objectives that you'll find in the ITC or most missions. They're also going to be my best solution for getting on objectives early in the game and going up on primary scores. Because they're so hard to remove, it's going to take a lot of my opponent's army to take them out, and then my gun line doesn't suffer. Additionally, there are some armies where if I charge them, I can really lock them down. You're going to see a lot of big tank-heavy armies, or even things like Dark Reapers. If you charge them and lock down their shooting, it can really help. Thanks for checking out my chapter-approved 2018 overview for the Tau Army. For more Tau tactics, check out my in-depth Tactica and subscribe to my channel for the upcoming battle reports. Thanks for watching.